The first lesson in this series of 2 was an introduction to relative clauses and their pronouns. In this lesson we will cover advanced topics such as the 2 types of relative clause, the grammatical feature called Pied Piping, and when the relative pronoun can be omitted. Relative clauses can be one of 2 types. In the first lesson we looked only at the much more common relative clause type, namely the defining clause. Note that, as so often in the field of grammar, there are different names for these type 1 clauses. They are also called restrictive, identifying, specifying, limiting, integrated, and adjective clauses. Type 2 relative clauses are called non-defining, non-restrictive, non-identifying, non-specifying, non-limiting, and supplementary clauses. In this lesson we will continue to use the first of each of these terms in the 2 types. This is because defining and non-defining are currently the most common terms in English language teaching resources. As the type 1 name suggests, defining relative clauses define, specify, or identify the person or thing we are referring to. Here are examples from Lesson 1 using the subject relative pronoun who. The defining relative clauses are shown in red and the antecedents in blue. The relative clauses on the right are embedded in the main clause. You will note that none of the defining relative clause sentences has internal punctuation. In other words, no commas. So, defining clauses specify or identify the person, thing, or subgroup we are referring to. For example, people who eat junk food are more likely to be overweight. Using a defining relative clause enables us to identify or specify the likely overweight subgroup as those who eat junk food. Similarly, the relative clause in the sentence, "What's the name of the tool which is used to open wine bottles?" defines or identifies the tool we are asking about. It makes no sense to omit the relative clause and just ask, "What's the name of the tool?" And no sense to say, "People are more likely to be overweight." So the defining clause is a necessary part of the sentence. Non-defining relative clauses do not define or identify or specify the antecedent. They give extra information about the antecedent. For example, the winner of the chess competition, who comes from China, is leaving the school at the end of the year. In this case, the information about the girl's nationality does not define or identify the girl. It is a supplementary or additional detail about her. A non-defining clause is not a necessary part of the sentence. The sentence still makes sense if the non-defining clause is omitted. For example, the winner of the chess competition is leaving the school at the end of the year. Note that non-defining clauses are separated off by commas when written, and when spoken they are said with a small pause both before and after in order to indicate their special supplementary function in the sentence. So, the winner of the chess competition, who comes from China, is leaving the school at the end of the year. Here are more sentences with non-defining relative clauses. Note that non-defining clauses can start with the relative pronouns who, whom, which, and whose. The relative adverbs when and where can also be used in non-defining clauses. For example, the centre of the village, where you'll find the church and the gardens, is very beautiful. And summer, when the sun is shining, is always my favourite time of year. Note that the relative adverb why cannot form a non-defining clause. A special kind of non-defining clause is a clause starting with the relative pronoun which, and referring back to the whole main clause as its antecedent. For example, he shouted at his boss, which is never a good idea. In this case, the relative clause is commenting on shouting at the boss. namely that it's never a good idea. This type of non-defining clause not only comments on the main clause, but also often states the result of the action or situation in the main clause. For example, I walk to work every day, which keeps me fit. The sentences on this slide are annotated according to whether the non-defining clause is more of a comment on the main clause or more the result of it. Note that in defining relative clauses, the pronoun that can be used in place of which. In non-defining clauses, however, the pronoun that is not possible. This is the case both when the antecedent is a noun and also when the antecedent is the whole main clause. The sentences on the right are ungrammatical. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. The Pied Piper of Hamelin had lots of rats and children following him. Pied piping in grammar refers to the placement of a preposition in front of a pronoun. For example, in front of the interrogative pronoun in "To whom are you talking?" or "With whom did she go to the dance?" If you think the term pied piping is non-descriptive and a bit silly, then I agree. Pied piping, when applied to relative clauses, moves the preposition to its place before the relative pronoun at the beginning of the relative clause. The sentences on the left show the preposition in its more common place after the verb. The equivalent sentences on the right show the placement of the preposition after pied piping to the front of the relative clause. Note that the relative adverbs where and when can often be replaced by the which plus a preposition alternative. For example, "This is the church where she got married" becomes "This is the church which she got married in." This version in turn can be pied piped to become "This is the church in which she got married." Here are more examples. On the left are sentences with the relative adverbs when and where. On the right, the relative adverbs have been replaced by the pied piped on which, at which, or in which. These are the more formal alternatives. 3 final points on pied piping. Firstly, pied piping is much more common in formal written language than in everyday spoken language. Moreover, it is usually in pied piping that you will still encounter the relative pronoun whom. For example, the person to whom I was speaking on the phone earlier was my mother. The pied piped version with who is ungrammatical and should be avoided. Secondly, you can bring the preposition to the front of the relative clause if the relative pronoun is who or which, but you cannot bring it to the front if the pronoun is the who or which alternative that. So, for example, "I can't find the pen with which I write my tests" is grammatical. But "I can't find the pen with that I write my tests" is not. Thirdly, you can pied pipe a preposition to the front of a whose relative clause. For example, "We saw a car on whose roof a cat was sitting," and "Do you know the girl to whose parents the school has written?" An alternative to the whose pronoun in such pied piping is to use which or whom. "We saw a car on the roof of which a cat was sitting," and "Do you know the girl to the parents of whom the school has written?" These constructions are very formal. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. The final topic to be covered here is the omission of the relative pronoun. In summary, some relative pronouns in defining clauses can be omitted. Some relative pronouns, together with the be verb that follows them, can be omitted in both defining and non-defining clauses. In order to know when the relative pronoun can be, and very often is, omitted, it is important to understand the pronoun's function in the relative clause. In the sentences on the left, the relative pronoun which functions as the subject of the clause. In the sentences on the right, which functions as the clause object, with the subject shown in green. The simple omission rule is, if the pronoun is the object of the relative clause, it can be omitted. If the pronoun is the subject of the relative clause, it cannot be omitted. So all of the sentences on the right are grammatical, and all of those on the left are not. The last slide had examples of when which can be omitted, namely when it is the object of the relative clause. The same applies to relative pronouns whom and that. Note, however, that who can never be omitted, except when it is incorrectly used as the object of the relative clause. For example, the use of who in "she's dating a man who she met at work" is incorrect, so who can be omitted in this case. Finally, note that the possessive relative pronoun whose can never be omitted, even when it is the clause object. So the sentences on the right are ungrammatical. The relative adverbs when, where and why do not function as the object of the relative clause, but they can sometimes be omitted. For example, I will never forget the day I first saw you. The office is the place many people spend most of their lives. What's the reason he said that? But this is a complex area of grammar, and omitting the relative adverb is often not possible, as in the last example. On the left are defining clause sentences in which the relative pronoun is the subject, followed by a form of the verb to be and a prepositional phrase or adjective. In each case, the pronoun and the be verb can be omitted, as shown in the sentences on the right. For example, the man standing by the gate is my ESL teacher. Such omissions result in what are called reduced relative clauses. Non-defining relative clauses which have a noun antecedent can also be reduced by omitting the relative pronoun and the be verb that follows it. Note that the commas are retained and the resulting reduced relative clauses are called apposition or appositives. They give supplementary information about the antecedent. Just be aware that such pronoun plus verb omissions may result in garden path sentences. A famous garden path example is, "The horse raced past the barn fell." Google the sentence to read how the pronoun plus verb omission results in ambiguity. Another such omission is, "The student insulted by the teacher ran out of the room." In the moment of processing the words, the reader may make a false assumption about who the insulter is. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. Okay, we've come to the end of this second lesson on relative clauses. Here is the important information in summary. In the description below this video, you will find a link to the lesson index page shown on the left. As you can see, there are 4 ways to access the content, as well as a glossary and links to quizzes and more information on the topic.